Some news doesn't knock. It waits. And when it finally steps inside, nothing feels the same again. The evening had started quietly, the kind that felt safe in its ordinary rhythm. The soft hum of the ceiling fan, the faint clink of dishes in the kitchen. She stood by the window, watching the last of the daylight fade. Her husband, Daniel, was in the living room, sorting through old paperwork he kept meaning to organize. Nothing about the moment felt important. That was the problem. Important moments rarely announce themselves. When the doorbell rang, she flinched. It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. Still, something tightened in her chest. Daniel looked up, confused. "We're not expecting anyone," he said, half smiling. She nodded but didn't smile back. Instinct doesn't always explain itself. Daniel opened the door. And there he was. Mark. His coworker. The one who had transferred to another branch nearly a year earlier. The one who had promised to stay in touch and slowly disappeared instead. Mark stood awkwardly on the porch, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He looked thinner, older somehow. His eyes flicked past Daniel, landing on her for just a second. That single glance carried something heavy. "Hey," Mark said softly. "Can I come in?" Daniel stepped aside immediately. "Of course. What's going on?" Mark hesitated before crossing the threshold, as if the air inside the house felt different, as if he knew he was bringing something with him.
"That doesn't make sense." "I know," Mark said quickly. "I said the same thing, but I saw the documents. I spoke to someone who was there when the decision was made." She watched Daniel's face change, disbelief slowly giving way to something else, something darker. "Why are you telling us this now?" Daniel asked. Mark's shoulders sagged. "Because it affected more than your career, and I didn't realize how much until it was too late." Her breath caught. "What do you mean, more?" Mark hesitated again, longer this time. "There was a report," he said quietly, "one that mentioned long-term risks, personal ones, the kind that don't show up right away." Daniel went pale. "What kind of risks?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Mark's eyes met hers, and for a moment she wished he would look away. "I think you deserve to know," he said, "but once I say it, things won't feel the same." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Daniel reached for her hand. His grip was tight, protective. Mark took one final breath. "It involves Daniel's health," he said, "and a decision that was made without his consent." Her world tilted. Before she could speak, before she could even form the right question, the weight of what was coming pressed down on her chest. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Mark leaned forward, voice trembling. "There's something else," he said, "and I don't know how to tell you this part." The room felt suddenly fragile, like one wrong word could shatter everything they had built. Some truths don't arrive all at once. They come in pieces, and each piece hurts in a different way. Mark sat forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might offer guidance. Daniel hadn't let go of her hand. If anything, his grip tightened. "Say it," Daniel said quietly. "No more circling." Mark nodded, slowly. The project involved extended exposure, not dangerous in the moment. That's what we were told. Her heart pounded. She already didn't like where this was going. But later, Mark continued, new data came in. Data that showed delayed effects, stress responses, neurological strain. Daniel frowned. "You're saying I was exposed to something harmful?" Mark shook his head quickly. "Not exactly harmful, not immediately, but risky, especially over time." She leaned forward. "You're talking about now?" aren't you?" Mark finally looked at her. "Yes." The room felt unbearably quiet. Even the ceiling fan seemed too loud. Daniel rubbed his temple, as if trying to push the words back out of his head. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" Mark's jaw tightened. Because acknowledging it would have meant admitting fault. Lawsuits. Careers ending. "So they buried it," she said. Mark nodded. They shut the project down, gave everyone new assignments, and hoped nothing would come of it. Daniel let out a slow breath. "And you?" "I believed them," Mark said.
For a long time. She studied his face. The guilt there felt real, heavy. "What changed?" she asked. "My sister," Mark replied. "She works in medical research. I mentioned the project casually. She asked questions I couldn't answer." Daniel stiffened. "She pulled public records," Mark continued. "Cross-referenced timelines, symptoms, patterns." Her chest tightened. "Symptoms of what?" Mark hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Memory gaps, chronic fatigue, emotional flattening, sudden anxiety without cause." Daniel's eyes flicked to her. She felt her throat close. Those late nights when Daniel forgot conversations they'd had only hours before, the exhaustion that sleep never seemed to fix, the way he sometimes stared off, distant, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. "You said stress," Daniel whispered. "He said it was just stress." "I wanted it to be," she replied softly. Mark's voice dropped. The report warned that effects could surface years later, especially in people who worked the longest hours. Daniel had always stayed late, always volunteered for extra shifts. "Is this permanent?" she asked. Mark swallowed. "We don't know." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the room. "So you come here to tell me my job might have broken me, and you don't even know how badly?" "I came because you deserve the truth," Mark said. "And because there's something else." The words landed hard. "There's more?" she asked. "Yes," Mark said. The company reopened the case internally, quietly. Daniel stopped pacing. "Why?" "Because someone got sick," Mark replied. "Someone higher up. Someone they couldn't ignore." Her breath caught. "And now?" Daniel asked. "Now they're offering evaluations," Mark said. "Medical screenings, counseling, only if you sign a confidentiality agreement." Silence. Daniel laughed, bitter and short. "So I get help only if I promise not to speak." "That's the condition," Mark said. She felt anger rise, hot and sharp. They put him at risk, and now they're protecting themselves. Mark nodded. "I know." Daniel turned to her. His eyes searched hers, full of questions he was afraid to ask. "What do you think?" he said quietly. She stood and stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. "I think your health matters more than their silence." Mark watched them, something like relief passing through his face. "There's a deadline," he said. "You have to decide soon." "How soon?" Daniel asked. "By the end of the month," Mark replied. "In writing." The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Each second felt heavier than the last. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Why are you really here, Mark?" Mark hesitated, then spoke. "Because I was on the approval chain," he said, "and I signed off without asking enough questions." Her heart sank. "I can't change that," Mark continued, "but I can make sure you're not left in the dark." Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was something new there. Not fear. Resolve. "Thank you for telling us," Daniel said. Mark stood, relief and sorrow mixing on his face. "I'm sorry it took so long." At the door, Mark paused. "One more thing," he said. They both looked up. "If the tests confirm what we suspect," Mark said carefully, "your lives may change in ways you don't expect." The door closed softly behind him. Daniel and she stood in the quiet house,
holding on to each other, both realizing the future they thought they understood had just shifted, and neither of them knew if they were ready for what came next. Some waiting feels louder than noise. Every thought echoes. Every second stretches too far. The days after Mark left blurred together. Not because nothing happened, but because too much did. Daniel tried to act normal. He went to work. He smiled when he was supposed to. But she saw the cracks. He misplaced his keys 3 times in one morning. Forgot why he'd walked into a room. Apologized too often for things that weren't his fault. At night, he lay awake beside her. Silent. Staring at the ceiling. She didn't push. She stayed close. The appointment came faster than either of them expected. A quiet building. Neutral walls. Soft voices. Daniel filled out forms with careful precision, as if neat handwriting could protect him. She sat beside him, reading the same paragraph over and over, without absorbing a word. The tests were gentle. Nothing invasive.
Still, they felt heavy. Memory checks. Reaction timing. Long conversations that seemed casual but weren't. When it was over, they were told to wait. Waiting was the hardest part. They spent an afternoon at a small cafe near the clinic. Daniel stirred his coffee until it went cold. "I hate this," he said finally. Not knowing. She reached across the table, touching his hand. "We'll face it together." He nodded, but his eyes drifted away. "I'm scared of becoming someone you don't recognize." Her chest tightened. "You're still you," she said. "And I'm not going anywhere." He looked at her then. Really looked. As if memorizing her face. The call came 2 days later. They sat on the couch, speakerphone between them. The doctor's voice was calm. Careful. The results showed mild cognitive strain. Subtle. Early. Not a diagnosis. Not yet. But enough to explain the changes. "There are steps we can take," the doctor said. "Monitoring, support, adjustments." Daniel exhaled slowly. "What caused it?" he asked. There was a pause. Extended stress exposure appears to be a contributing factor. They both knew what that meant. After the call ended, Daniel sat quietly, processing. She waited. "I should tell my parents," he said at last. Her heart skipped. "That's a big step." "They'll notice eventually," he replied. "And I don't want them hearing it from anyone else." The visit was scheduled for the weekend. His parents' house smelled like familiar comfort. Fresh bread. Old memories. They sat around the kitchen table, mugs warming their hands. Daniel cleared his throat. "There's something I need to talk about." His mother's smile faded. His father leaned forward. He explained slowly, carefully. He didn't dramatize, didn't minimize. When he finished, silence settled in. His mother reached for his face, cupping his cheek. "We're here," she said softly. His father nodded. "We'll help however we can." Relief washed through her. But not everyone responded the same way. Later that evening, Daniel's younger brother pulled her aside. His expression was tight. "Are you sure this isn't just burnout?" he asked. "Daniel's always worked too hard." She kept her voice calm. "It's more than that." He frowned. "You don't know that for sure." Doubt slipped into the room like cold air. That night, Daniel lay awake again. She felt it. "My brother thinks I'm overreacting," he said quietly. She turned toward him. "You're not." "What if I am?" he whispered. "What if I make this my whole life and it turns out to be nothing?" She rested her forehead against his. "Then we'll adjust, but ignoring it won't make it disappear."
He closed his eyes. A week later, an envelope arrived. No return address, just their names. Inside was a single letter. Typed. Formal. The company acknowledged potential oversight. They offered support services and a reminder of the confidentiality agreement. Daniel stared at the page.
"They're afraid," he said. "Yes," she replied. "And that means something matters." At the bottom of the letter was a line that made her stomach drop. Participation required immediate enrollment. Declining would close the case permanently. Daniel folded the paper slowly. "We have to decide," he said. She nodded. But something about the letter felt incomplete. Too careful. As if something had been left out on purpose. That night, as Daniel slept fitfully beside her, she stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that this wasn't the full truth. And that someone, somewhere, still hadn't finished speaking. Some choices don't feel like choices at all. They feel like doors that close behind you the moment you step forward. Daniel read the letter again the next morning. Slowly, as if a new meaning might appear between the lines. "They're rushing us," he said. She nodded. That usually means they're hiding something. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across unopened mail. Life kept moving, even when theirs felt paused. "I don't want to sign away my voice," Daniel said. "But I also don't want to ignore my health." She reached for his hand. "Maybe we don't have to choose in the way they expect." That afternoon, she made a call. Not to a lawyer. Not to the company. To Mark. He answered on the second ring. His voice sounded wary. "I was hoping you'd call," he said. "Is there more?" she asked gently. There was a pause. "Yes." Mark had sailed.
"There's an internal review board, off the books. They don't show up in the letter." Daniel leaned closer, listening. "They're tracking long-term outcomes," Mark continued, quietly, without admitting responsibility. "Why tell us now?" Daniel asked. "Because your name came up," Mark said. Again. Her pulse quickened. "They flagged your case as higher priority," Mark explained. "Not because of current symptoms, because of projected risk." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Risk of what?" Mark hesitated. "Acceleration." The word hung in the air. "There's a second program," Mark said. "Experimental support. Not harmful, but unproven." She shook her head. "They want him to be a test case." "Yes," Mark admitted. "And they don't want that public." Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "So the letter was just the safe option." "Exactly," Mark said. Silence followed. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. Mark's voice softened. "Because I watched too many people walk away without answers, and I can't do that again." After the call ended, the house felt heavier. "They're asking you to trust them again," she said quietly. Daniel stared at the wall. "I don't know if I can." That evening, Daniel surprised her. He pulled out a notebook. Old, worn. "I've been writing things down," he said. "Moments I forget. Days that blur." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to lose myself without noticing," he added. She sat beside him, flipping through pages filled with small observations. What he ate, how he felt, what made him laugh. "You're still here," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Some days I need proof." A knock interrupted them. They weren't expecting anyone. She opened a door to find a woman standing there, mid-aged, professional. "Daniel Harris?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel replied from behind her. The woman introduced herself calmly. She worked with occupational health. Independent, she said. "I was asked to check in," the woman continued. "Off record." Daniel stiffened. "By who?" She didn't answer directly. "By someone concerned about your well-being." The visit was brief. Questions. Observations. Before leaving, the woman paused. "Whatever you decide," she said quietly, "make sure it's your decision, not theirs." The door closed. Daniel exhaled sharply.
That felt like pressure. Yes, she agreed, and like a warning. That night, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, notebook in hand. If I say yes, he said, I might get help sooner, maybe better help. And if you say no, she asked. I keep my voice, he replied, but risk losing support. She took his face in her hands. We'll build support if we have to. He leaned into her touch, eyes closing. I'm afraid, he admitted. Not of getting worse, of making the wrong choice. She held him. You're not alone in this choice. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. Soft, persistent.
Daniel looked at the letter one last time, then folded it neatly. I'll decide tomorrow, he said. She nodded. But as she turned off the light, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change more than just a signature, and that once the choice was made, there would be no turning back. Some endings don't arrive with certainty. They arrive with courage. Quiet, steady courage. Morning light crept into the room, pale and honest. Daniel sat at the kitchen table before she woke, the letter placed neatly in front of him. He wasn't reading it anymore. He already knew what it said. She joined him, sliding into the chair across the table. They looked at each other for a long moment. I've decided, he said. Her heart thudded once. Okay. I'm not signing, Daniel continued. Not like this. Not quietly. She felt a mix of fear and relief rush through her. Are you sure? He nodded. I want help, but not at the cost of disappearing. They wrote a response together. Clear, respectful. Daniel agreed to independent monitoring and support. He declined the confidentiality terms. He asked for transparency. They mailed it before doubt could settle in. The response came faster than expected. A short email, carefully worded. The company acknowledged his decision. They withdrew their offer. They wished him well. Daniel read it once, then closed his laptop. That's it, he said. She watched his face, waiting for regret. It didn't come.
Instead, there was something else. Relief. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were honest. Daniel adjusted his work schedule, accepted help, rested without guilt. They found a specialist who listened, who explained things without fear. The strain didn't vanish, but it stabilized. Some days were sharp, others were gentle. And through it all, Daniel kept his notebook. One evening, months later, they sat on the porch as the sun dipped low. The air felt calm. I wrote something today, Daniel said, handing her the notebook. She read quietly. Not about symptoms, not about fear, about gratitude, about moments that still felt whole. He had written about her laugh, about the way morning smelled like coffee and hope, about choosing truth, even when it cost something. She blinked back tears. You didn't lose yourself, she said softly. He smiled. I found parts I wasn't paying attention to before. Mark called that night. I heard, he said, about your decision. Daniel braced himself. And? And others are following, Mark replied, asking questions, pushing back. Daniel closed his eyes. Good. I wanted you to know, Mark added. You mattered. After the call ended, Daniel sat quietly. I never wanted to be brave, he said. I just wanted to be okay. She leaned against him. Sometimes those are the same thing. Time moved on. Slowly. Kindly. Not everything returned to the way it was, but something better took its place. Awareness.
And a future built on honesty. One night, as Daniel drifted to sleep beside her, he squeezed her hand. Thank you for not letting me disappear, he whispered. She smiled in the dark. Thank you for staying. Outside, the world kept turning, unaware of the quiet victory inside their home. And for the first time in a low while, the unknown didn't feel like a threat. It felt like possibility.